ministry among us in so many ways. And we thank you for the way that he has given time and prayerful thought to preparing this message for us. And so we pray that you will speak through him in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Jigsaw puzzles. Who here has done a jigsaw puzzle in the last few years? Ooh. Yeah, well, they can be quite fun, can't they? You know, those that haven't done it, don't knock it. It can be quite instructive, particularly if there's things on your mind and you want to be occupied. And a couple of years ago, Deb and I were going through a tough time while waiting for some results. And we bought jigsaws. I bought a really, really tough jigsaw from the charity shop. About, I don't know, 3 million pieces, I think. You know, each one is smaller than your thumbnail. And the thing about jigsaws is you can't always tell the bigger picture when you start off looking at the small piece. And so the talk this morning is going to be a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. There are going to be some small pieces, and then hopefully we'll put them together and see if a picture emerges. And the first piece of the jigsaw puzzle relates to a time when I used to live by the sea. And in fact, it was a little village called St Agnes, and before we left, I bought a book, a history book about the quay down by the beach. And do you know what? I found a photograph of myself in it. I always think if you find a photo of yourself in a history book, yeah, I know, it hurts me too. But if you do, you're either dead or it's time to leave. And that's why we're in Malvern. But anyhow, a story about a boat, my boat. We live by the sea, as I say, and I was really keen to get out there on the ocean. And so, with a friend, he was from Reading, I was from this part of the world originally, Townies, as we were known by the locals, we decided to build a boat. And over one winter, that lovely yellow-looking boat in the middle, we built that. Really, really proud of that boat. And it's a lovely shape as well. It's great for punching through the sea, and it's called Barry Patrick. It was a combination of our two names. And we decided on one fateful day, after we'd spent all winter building this boat, to launch into the sea. I looked for volunteers. His wife was nowhere to be seen, but my wife, a very brave person, decided to join us on this expedition. And the thing you have to remember about some places by the sea, and this was actually where we lived, you had to launch the boat straight into the sea. There wasn't a harbour. So the great day came, and I thought the waves were okay, manageable. And the other thing you have to remember when you launch into the sea is you have to have a knowledge of the sea. Now, we all know there are waves, but yeah, you're with me so far. See, you're a lot apart. But apart from waves, there are also things called sets. If you're surfing, you know that you get waves coming in, and then every sort of 30 seconds or every minute, depending on the sea conditions, a set of 3 bigger waves will come in. They're called sets, and they're what you have to look out for when you're surfing, and particularly you have to look out for them if you're launching your boat, because the last thing you want to do is get out there and discover a huge set of waves heading your way. So the skill is getting out in between the sets. So we got our boat on the trolley and we drag it down to the sea and we push it in the water. I have the honour that day of its inaugural launch. I'm the captain. So Debbie gets in the boat, Patrick gets in the boat, and we look out to sea. And we watch really carefully. Because behind us, in a great array, are the fishermen. And they are muttering, and they are sneering, and they are, words like townies and emmets are being repeated. And their one desire is to see us come unstuck. And I watch and watch, and then I decide the moment is right. And we go, and I gun the motor, and we zoom out to sea. That's the first jigsaw picture. Okay? I'll tell you what happened after we launched in a moment. That'll be another jigsaw piece. Going back to the reading for a moment. we've got Paul passing on the message on his second missionary journey. He's been out there preaching absolute heresy to the Jews. Absolute heresy. We think of it as passing on the good news. Well, it wasn't good news for the Jews. It's a bit like me coming here today and saying, the new Messiah has just come. He's got a shop in Barnard's Green. Believe it. It's good news. Forget Jesus. He's in Barnard's Green. You'd think, hang on a minute, that's heresy. I'm not having that. You get quite angry, and rightly so. And so, in the town he's just come from, Philippi, he was arrested. He was actually put in prison for preaching what he was preaching. And it was only when he said that he was a Roman citizen that they released him, and he was able to make his way to Thessalonica. So here he is. I mean, you can see in the photograph, obviously, those modern flats weren't there then, but there's a bit of a kind of theatre, and it could well be that he was actually preaching. Paul was actually preaching in something like that. And we know that he was there for less than a month, but he has success. In verse 4, some Jews who listened, some of them, were persuaded, and they joined Paul and Silas, along with many God-fearing Greek men, and quite a few prominent women. So not just Jews, but non-Jews, Greeks and women, were persuaded. That means they were convinced. They were persuaded of what he was saying. The message that he was giving was having a profound effect on them. Verse 5, but some of the Jews were jealous, and they gathered some troublemakers from the marketplace and formed a mob, and they started a riot, and they went looking for Paul in the home of Jason, and they wanted to drag him out, and presumably, and possibly kill him. So he needs to act quickly, and he leaves. But he sees this new church, which is standing resolute against the prevailing culture. On that little video clip, we saw how they were calling Jesus King, Jesus Lord. And that was a departure from Caesar, and Caesar wanted them to say that he was Lord. So they're holding fast, and he recognises their shining witness, as it were, to Jesus. And so he celebrates his early church, which is inspired by faith, love, and hope. These are the three characteristics that they have. And he celebrates the fact that God chose them. And the gospel came not just in words, but in power. They were persuaded. The Holy Spirit had actually impacted on them, and they were now becoming imitators of Jesus. So the Holy Spirit is starting to really form a really important part of their lives. And some of the people are hearing this message and believing it and being transformed. And they're turning from idols and they're starting to imitate Jesus. Seeing, hearing, receiving, and being transformed. And just think about it for a moment. It's not like they went, "Ooh, what a lovely message, I think we'll believe that. I'll be transformed." It doesn't work like that, does it? They were being persecuted, so there had to be some compelling reason for them to change. And this is the second piece of our jigsaw puzzle. It is, in fact, they were being transformed by a new power, the Holy Spirit. Jigsaw piece number 3. I've called this, "It's Not All Plain Sailing." What happened when we launched the boat? Well, it started off really well. I'd done the engine. It roared beautifully into life. That was their first hope, that the engine would misfire. And we started to go out. And I knew, because I'd read the book, that you need weight in the front of the boat. Okay? You need weight to punch through even small waves, lest they kind of toss you backwards or you broach sideways. So, I'm not saying my wife's big, but I said, "Deb, forward." And she went forward along with Patrick, who's a big lad, he's a big firefighter. What I had worked out was that their combined weight at the front of the boat would, in fact, with my small frame, lift the back of the boat right out of the water. So at this point, there was a loud whirring sound as my propeller was sort of acting a bit more like an aeroplane than a boat. At which point, the boat stopped. There was a faint but distinct cheering sound from behind me. and the word townie came to mind. Anyhow, I instructed them back in a sort of high-pitched squeal. And as they came back, the motor engaged in the water, and I looked back to say, ha, got you lot, only to see, coming my way, a massive set of waves. I couldn't turn around, I just had to carry on. And as we hit these three waves, I'll never forget it. It was a wall of green water that just, I saw Deb disappear, literally under this wave. In fact, I've got a photograph to give you an inkling. That's not it, but it was a bit like that. It just broke entirely over the boat, three of them in a row. I mean, the cheering by this time was amazing, you know. And by the time we sort of wallowed through these waves, the boat was completely full of water. We were utterly drenched. And we were trying to debate whether to go fishing. There was a bit of disagreement at this time. Deb was firm with the view that we go back and have a hot shower and, you know, a cup of tea. And then we discovered I hadn't put the bungs in. So that really did it, because, you know, we were sinking as well. So, not a good day, really. Although I have to say that the fishermen were delighted and we made their day. It's not a place, you know, opposition, this is the point, this is the next piece of jigsaw. Meeting and encountering problems and opposition. Okay, so that's the second piece. Now, this is going to be very unusual. I don't think this has ever been done before. The fourth piece of the jigsaw. I had a book for Christmas for my daughter, on the screen there. How to Read Water. Clues and patterns from puddles to the sea. I want a chapter about puddles. It's quite interesting, actually. I could have had socks or slippers, instead I have a book on puddles. And I don't think many sermons have been quoted books on puddles before, but maybe this is the first. But as I was reading the introduction, a story just leapt out at me last week, and I thought, I really have to use this story. So please bear with me. It's an unusual story, and I've cut it down in time, but it's this. And I'll just make a point that the author of this book, Tristan Gooley, unfortunate name, he was a keen sailor and had just passed his Royal Yachting Association navigation qualification. And he's setting out on a trip to Norway. But he's got a worry. And the worry is that he's quite inexperienced. And everywhere he looked, he saw this Captain Abraham. Now, it's a strange thing because Captain Abraham lived and died 1,000 years ago. But it's his story that provides our next jigsaw piece. So this man, Abraham, began his working life as a shepherd in Persia. A job on a fishing boat then took him to sea, and this in turn led him to work as a sailor on one of the boats on the dangerous journey in the South China Sea. Many people died on this route, but he became an expert, a legend in his time. Also on that dangerous route was a Captain Shiha, and he was in the middle of the sea in a calm, waiting out his worrying calm in the middle of the typhoon season. And in the distance he saw a little boat, and he sent 4 sailors to investigate. When they arrived, they found this Captain Abraham sitting in a canoe with nothing but a water skin. And they thought he needed rescuing, but he refused to be rescued unless they paid him a large sum of money. Captain Shahi and the crew thought this over very carefully, but their estimate of his wisdom and their fear of the strange weather conditions meant they agreed. Once on board, Captain Abraham demanded his money and then told the captain and the crew to listen very carefully and obey his every instruction. He explained they were in great danger and they must throw the cargo overboard, saw down the mast and cut the anchor chain. Now, that was staggering because those 3 things are key to the sailor's life, but they obeyed. A few days later, a huge cloud rose up in the sky till it filled the entire sky, then it crumpled down as a huge typhoon hit them. It raged for 4 days, but the new lightness of the ship allowed it to float like a cork, and it bobbed over the waves and the reefs. and they were saved instead of being smashed and swamped and drowned. On the fourth day, the wind died down, and the crew were able eventually to make their way safely to China. The crew was stunned, and they asked Captain Abraham how had he known where to look and how had he forecast the typhoon so accurately. And he explained that detailed knowledge of the moon, intimate knowledge and understanding of the tides and the signs in the water made all of it perfectly straightforward. And the author goes on to finish by saying, and so it was that Captain Abraham's deep intuition and understanding haunted me on my voyage from Norway. You see, the thing is, the wisdom that allowed Captain Abraham to read the signs was not to be found in any of the books or exams the author had passed. And so this is our fourth jigsaw piece, a deep knowledge of the author and originator. So we've got 4 pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. Stepping out in faith, transformed by a new power, encountering problems and opposition, and a deep knowledge of the author and originator. When you put these together in our sort of faith life, a complete picture emerges. And you realise that God in Jesus has transformed the picture completely. It now imitates Jesus. Stepping out our faith life. Transformation. Experiencing the power of the Holy Spirit. Facing opposition. Knowing God. And imitating Jesus. This is what the Christians in Thessalonica experienced as the good news was passed to them. And this is exactly what happens to us today. As the good news is passed on, we see lives change. So let's have a little look at the few pieces of the jigsaw puzzle and how they apply to us today. So, stepping out in faith, firstly. 3 weeks, certainly less than a month, was all it took for transformation to take place in the lives of the Thessalonians. And they stepped out in faith. A bit like my boat when we launched. They were stepping out, as it were, metaphorically, in faith. It took them 4 weeks. How many weeks have you been a Christian for? If you're a Christian, that is. How many weeks? How many months? How many years? Have you, or are you stepping out? Or are you happy sheltering in worldly security? It's a valid question. Worldly security has its attractions, but it's very temporary, isn't it? Worldly security is a temporary thing. Heavenly security, given its eternity, lasts a little bit longer. And yet we base so many of our decisions on worldly security. It just cannot be changed if everything stays the same. And I think if we're going to imitate Jesus, we have to be a bit like we were in that boat on the shore, a bit apprehensive, but stepping out in faith, not always knowing what will happen next. Transformed by power. We don't do this on our own. The Thessalonians didn't do it on their own. Jesus promises us His Spirit, the Holy Spirit. It's available to us. It's here now. It'll be with you when you go home. Holy Spirit, He is with us. He remains with us. Look, I could preach the most fantastic sermon. It's possible in theory. But truly, you will not walk out of this church changed or transformed by anything I say on its own. You will not be transformed by my words. You will only be transformed by the power of the Holy Spirit, using whatever poor words I have in your situation and in your life. And I think we fight, particularly in this current generation, against a massive wall of cynicism. This generation that we all live in hates change. There's a joke, isn't there? What does it go? How many Anglicans does it take to change a light bulb? Change? It's an old joke, but it indicates something of our inability to really accept that people can change. Social media these days can castigate somebody, and that is pretty much it for life now. You know, whatever you do in the future, you say you've changed. We don't believe it. The ability to change is met with a sneer. And yet, being transformed, which is what happened to the Thessalonians, by the power of the Holy Spirit, is at the heart of our Christian message. That we can cross from death to life. That people can be transplanted from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light. People who are lost can be found. That we can become new creations in Jesus. The Bible is clear. We are part of that, just like the Thessalonians. Transformation of human beings can happen. It's real. And it arrived in the form of Jesus. Facing opposition. I confess that our boat journey, our boat launch, didn't go as smoothly as we had planned. And I think we have to recognise that in our faith journey, things don't always go as we would wish or that we would plan. The simple message of Christ that we have strength in weakness, humility above pride, we support the outcast, the last shall be first, is countercultural, totally countercultural. And there's an alienation that can even come within our family, our circle of family and friends. You must all, I'm sure, have experienced difficulties in talking to family or friends about your faith. Sometimes it's far more difficult to talk to people you know and you love than it is to talk to people you don't know so well. Well, the thing is, the Thessalonians did not give up. That's why Paul was so delighted. That's why he wrote this letter to them, thanking them for all they were doing and encouraging them. Paul never gave up. Jesus never gave up. Millions of Christians down the ages haven't given up. There are Christians around the world today, in many parts of the world, who sacrifice all to pass on the good news and hold fast to their faith. And there's one little verse in here that struck a chord with me, which was verse 4. For we know, brothers and sisters, loved by God, that He's chosen you. I think that's amazing to think that God has chosen every one of us individually. Paul says, God chose you, and you became imitators of the Lord, for you welcome the message. He's chosen us. All we have to do is welcome the message, and we become imitators of Jesus. And finally, a deep knowledge of the author and originator, which of course is God. And I just wrote a simple question here. Do we know Him? Do we know Him? In both of those stories of boats and navigation that we heard, there was a clash, wasn't there? Theory over practice. Head knowledge versus heart knowledge. And this can be true again in part of our faith journey. Captain Abraham had a deep and intimate knowledge of the sea. If he hadn't, they would all have died. If I had a better knowledge of my boat in the sea, we may have stayed dry and not been humiliated. You can read the Bible every day. You can know it inside out. But if you don't know the author, it'll be academic, theoretic, head knowledge. You come to church every Sunday, all your life, but if you don't know Jesus and the power that lies within, you're going to waste some time. And unless you know the sea, there's a risk you'll be swamped by the first big waves of your life. The band are going to come up in a moment, and in fact they come up now, and we're going to sing a song. But I was reminded of a chap called S.M. Longridge, wrote this fantastic sort of prayer about, do you know him? You've probably seen the YouTube clip where he goes on for ages in this fantastic prayer, you know. I wonder if you know him. My King is the King. He's the key to knowledge, the wellspring of wisdom, the doorway of deliverance, the pathway of peace, the road to righteousness. He goes on for 5 or 10 minutes about his love for Jesus. Do you know him? I'm going to leave you with a couple of questions and then we're going to move into a time of worship. Do you have a deep knowledge of the author and originator? Do you want to step out in faith? Are you wanting today to be transformed and become an imitator of Jesus? Are you able and confident of holding fast even when encountering opposition and the storms of life? So I'm going to invite you as we play this first song to respond to the words of the song, which are, Holy Spirit, living breath of God, breathe new life into my willing soul. Bring the presence of the risen Lord to renew my heart and make me whole.